Hello, everybody, and welcome back to 50 Shades of Tay. I'm Taylor Gonzalez, and my guest today is a public historian who specializes in warfare and modern media and author of The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire. I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Chris Kempshall. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been really looking forward to this.
Oh, well, thank you for being here. Your introduction was very hard to nail down because you're so accomplished and you have so many things that I wanted to include, but I also was like, I can't get stuck on it. So
Like some of the ones when I've done it, it's like, did they send over like my entire CV? It's like, and now his blood type is here. We've got his dental records as well. We'll just go start going through everything that he's done.
It's so funny. But yeah, I was going over your bio on your website and I was like, wow, this is incredible. And it's so cool that you also are interested in Star Wars because that's like one of my favorite things of all time is the Star Wars franchise.
Yeah,
And
it's one of my favorite things of all time as well.
it is so fun. I love getting to talk about Star Wars. When I'm not talking about horror films like I was just telling you about, I'm talking about Star Wars. So
At
it's
some
just,
point that fusion will happen. We'll get like a Star Wars horror film. We nearly got one. We nearly got an Andor episode that was Star Wars horror, and a bit of the Acolyte was basically a slasher film. But at
mhm.
some point, that sweet spot will appear.
It's going to happen. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. But I wanted to start out with talking about Star Wars Celebration in Japan. I know you just got back from them not too long ago, and it just looked like such an incredible experience. How was that for you getting to go to Japan and be on the stage and
It was
celebrate Star
great.
Wars?
So it was my third celebration. The last one before Japan was in London, which was real convenient. It's like, oh no, I just have to travel slightly away from my home. And the one before that, I was in Anaheim, and that must have been 2022, maybe something like that. All the years are
Yeah.
horribly blending together at this point. Um, but Tokyo was great. I mean, it was the first time I've ever been to Japan. It was the first time I'd ever been to Tokyo. And the 3 days of celebration were. I mean, celebration's always like a ton of fun because you have, an enormous amount of people. And I think I'd heard that it was like 160, 170,000 people. There
Oh
was
my
what
gosh.
Lucasfilm were saying that it might be. And obviously, all of them love Star Wars. But also, you have subset groups who all love their specific thing. Some are there for the merch, some want to hear about action figures, some love the books, some are like 100% into cosplay. And you've got all of these kind of subgroups of people all orbiting around within the vicinity of the thing that they love, which is really, really cool. And as you said, I was on the Celebration live stage, which was amazing, particularly because the two previous celebrations I've been at, I spent a bunch of time sat down by the live stage just watching it. It's the best. It's like the live stage is my favorite place to be for celebration because it was like, oh, I could queue up for maybe 16 or 17 hours to get into one of the panels, or just wait 15 minutes. They'll bring the actors out and they'll interview them, and it'll be fun there. So yeah, I ended up doing a ton of stuff. It was like two or three things every day. There were book signings, there were podcast interviews, there were panels. So my voice by the end of it was like clinging on by its fingernails, but the whole thing together it was a ton of fun. I had a great time.
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah, it just looked like so much fun. I watched it from home, but the good
Wrapped
news
up in a
is
blanket at 3 o'clock in the morning.
yeah, the good news is the next one's going to be really close to me here in LA. So, goal
Yeah.
is to go for the 50th anniversary and celebrate with everybody in person. It looks like an incredible experience. So I have to do it, for myself.
Yeah. I think the fact that they've booked, my understanding is, or I'd heard that it was going to be LA, and I heard quite early on in Celebration it was probably going to be LA. That clearly they're planning for it to be enormous. They're planning for a big thing. So yeah, I think people who get to go will have a great time.
Yeah, I cannot wait for it. But you mentioned something. So you mentioned that people are there for different things, whether it's the action figures, the video games, the comic books. There's so
Yeah.
many different entry points to Star Wars, whether, you watched it first or you read about it first or you played something first. I was curious, what was your very first experience into the world of Star Wars?
So I kind of have two entry points to Star Wars. I have like the original one, which was that over here in the UK we recorded um A New Hope and Return of the Jedi off of the TV on old VHS cassettes in the 1980s. Weirdly, we didn't have Empire Strikes Back. I don't know if we'd
Oh, wow.
recorded over it or something like that. So, that's what happens with VHS cassettes. And I watched those to death to the extent that watching them now, I find quite an odd experience because they don't have ad breaks when I watch it on Disney Plus, where I would expect there to be like a
Mhm.
1980s advert break. So I watched those a lot, and there's never been a time when Star Wars wasn't a part of my life and kind of in my kind of pop culture existence. But then, I played some of the computer games like Super Star Wars and like on the Game Boy and stuff like that. But then it must have been around 1997-ish that I was on holiday in Florida with my family. And in downtown Disney, there used to be an enormous Virgin Megastore. And I went in there one day and like the third floor of eight was books. And I went in and I saw a Star Wars book called Spectre of the Past by Timothy Zahn, which is from the old expanded universe. I was like, I like books, I like Star Wars, why not? And I bought it and must have read it within about 8 hours, and then immersed myself in the old expanded universe, got all of the novels, and then played all of the computer games and the like, and then everything kind of cascaded from there as Star Wars became a bigger and bigger part of my life.
That is so cool. I remember my very first introduction to Star Wars was on Laserdisc, way, way, way back.
Ooh.
And it's so funny because I, as a kid, was so confused about Laserdiscs, and they were double-sided and multiple discs. So sometimes I would put it on in the wrong order. Like the Death Star would be in one scene and then it would be
Yeah.
not in
What the
the
hell's
next scene.
going on?
So,
There's
but
no
now,
continuity.
yeah, now it's easy to just stream it or put on a Blu-ray. But there are so many different characters throughout the galaxy. You have your original trilogy characters. Now there's
Yeah.
people like the Mandalorian and Ahsoka. Do you have a favorite Star Wars character?
Do I have a favorite Star Wars character? So the one that I find the most interesting that I could probably like continue to think about or talk about or write about or interact in some way with forever is probably the Emperor. I think the
Ooh,
Emperor's a fascinating character, and the more that we find out about him, the more interesting I think he becomes. But for my favorite character, probably for reasons that we'll get to shortly, I kind of feel like contractually obliged to say Beaumont Kin is now my favorite Star Wars character simply because the pair of us have been through a lot together. And he'll be real salty if I don't say that he's my favorite character. So Palpatine, I think, is the most interesting character in Star Wars, but I will continue to have a lot of love for Beaumont Kin.
Oh, those are both great answers. I know you've written a few Star Wars books at this point, but I was curious, how did you go from being a kid and watching, Star Wars on your VHS tape to now writing for Star Wars?
I mean, the short answer is outrageous good fortune, but the slightly kind of longer explanatory answer is that I was doing some academic work where I was basically writing academically about Star Wars. And during the pandemic, all of the archives and the libraries closed because everything closed. I imagine it was probably very similar in LA as it was for me here in the UK. And then there was a brief period in August 2020 when a big um, library in London reopened, and I needed some stuff there. Partly also for a different thing I was doing about the British and French armies. So I booked myself in for like the second day it was open to make sure because I was like, no one knows how long this is going to last for. And I went in and I did all the research and I came out and I tweeted that, I was in the British Library today. For anybody who's coming down for the rest of the week or the next few weeks, honestly, I felt really safe in there. People were socially distancing, they were masking, there was loads of hand sanitizer, all the stuff that we were doing in 2020. And the British Library basically got in contact and said, "Oh, can we share this around a little bit as part of our big reopening stuff?" And I was like, "It's on the internet, do whatever you want." And they were like, "So what was it that you were doing there?" And I was like, "Well, I was doing some stuff about the British and French armies, but I was also doing a little bit of research for this Star Wars thing that I'm working on." And they tweeted that out, and an editor at DK Books in the UK saw that tweet from the British Library and got in contact with me through a variety of channels through my website to ask if I'd be interested in helping them work on a book that they were working on called Battles That Changed the Galaxy. That is a military history of the major Star Wars battles. So it was, if you think about how unlikely all of those random steps were, it's the short answer is outrageous good fortune. But it was the history background that kind of put me on DK's radar, I think.
That is so crazy to think that, like, it was because of social media, and it's like
Yeah,
that's something that when I was watching Star Wars and you were watching Star Wars on, VHS, that didn't even exist, and then
nope,
now it helped to create. That's crazy. That is so
yeah.
awesome, though.
But it also causes me kind of like virtually every good thing in my career has come through social media or probably come through Twitter, which now when I look at the platform, it's like, uh,
Yeah.
I don't want that anymore. But yeah, like it was just random good luck that it happened. And that email that he sent me asking me, did you want, would you be interested, went into my spam folder.
Oh
Um,
no.
and I didn't find it for a couple of hours, and God knows I hate that.
Yeah.
As a alternative reality where we're not talking about fun, cool stuff like this, and I'm just continuing doing whatever the hell it was I would have been doing anyway.
Oh my gosh. Well, you mentioned Star Wars battles that changed the galaxy. You're one of the writers on that. So I was wondering what your favorite battle in Star Wars history is.
That's a really good question. Um, I think it might be the Battle of Endor. I mean, I've got a lot of love for Return of the Jedi, and I like the ground battle going on simultaneously with the space battle, and it is so epic. And if you think about the original trilogy, for a franchise that's called Star Wars, there isn't that much space battling going on in the franchise. Obviously, you get the Battle of Yavin in A New Hope, but that's kind of, small fighters. If we're talking like big space battle, it is only Return of the Jedi that exists in that original trilogy that kind of reflects something like it. And, it's the end of the trilogy. The stakes are so high, ships are blowing up, stuff's going on. So it might be Return of the Jedi. But I also remember being in the cinema at midnight for Revenge of the Sith and having
Ooh.
the Battle of Coruscant kind of play out through that amazing opening sequence and thinking that's cool as hell. That's super. There's so much going on, and there's like an element of like having vertigo as you kind of dive down endlessly through space. So I love the Battle of Endor, but the Battle of Coruscant's pretty cool as well.
Oh my gosh, I love both those battles too. I was trying to think about my favorite battle, and it's like, I don't know. I don't know how to pick because every time I think I picked one, it's like, oh, but then what about this? Or what about this? Or like Hoth, or there's just so
Yeah,
many different battles, and they're all so different in the
and they're
settings.
all
And
offering something ever so slightly different to them, either narratively or in like the technology. Because you say Hoth is an epic ground battle, and you've got
Mhm.
big walking AT-ATs, and that's doing something very different to the Battle of Yavin, which this helps make it cool.
Yeah, no. And every time I think about the Battle of Hoth, I'm just like, man, I want to see more of it. Like I want like an extended. That's why I love going on Star Tours at Disneyland because you get to
Yeah,
like fly through some of these battles and it adds to it a little bit more.
yeah, it does. And you got to spot a few little other fun things that are going on around the side of the screen.
Yeah. So speaking of social media, I noticed on your Instagram that you play lots of games. And
Yes.
I was wondering if you've ever played any of the Star Wars games. Like, I think Empire at War was my favorite growing up
Yep.
on the PC. That one was so fun. Do you play any of those types of games?
Oh, good Lord, yes, I do. So if we'll start with computer games, and then I think we'll go from there. So yeah, I played Empire at War when it came out, and I really, really liked it. I don't like the ground battles in Empire at
Okay.
War, and it's one of the one things that keeps stopping me from playing some of the amazing mods that people have been doing. Because like, oh, fantastic, I can bring in some Star Destroyers, and then I need to move a bunch of stormtroopers around on the planet, and that has always been less interesting to me. Um, the precursor, like a sort of precursor to Empire at War, was a game that in America was called Rebellion, but over in the UK was called Supremacy, which was all space combat, which I absolutely loved and just played to death as well. But I think the most important computer game that I've ever played, regardless of it being Star Wars or not, was an online, massively multiplayer online role-playing game that was in the early 2000s called Star Wars Galaxies,
Ooh.
um, which was just the most amazing game, and absolutely changed my life because, firstly, you got to play in a world where it was Star Wars, and who wouldn't want to do that for a living? But I also wrote like when I was playing it, I wrote a ton of fan fiction to kind of hone my writing aspects, and to do that, I gobbled up even more and more and more of the expanded universe. So when it came to doing stuff like battles, and when we'll talk about Rise and Fall, the grounding I got from playing Star Wars Galaxies of kind of getting these ideas across and like was absolutely kind of a massive formative experience for me. And then I've played a bunch of the tabletop games. So I've played X-Wing, I've played Armada. I really like Imperial Assault. Me and a friend have just completed a campaign in Imperial Assault, so we need to start working on the next one. It's a shame that those games aren't made anymore. I can understand why with the licensing and the like, but they were, firstly, they're a ton of fun. The models are really, really cool. It's a type of thing that it's like, oh, it's a miniature game with Star Destroyers. Like, you could have just printed out a piece of cardboard with a Star Destroyer on it, and people would have played it. But they've made tiny little Star Destroyer models for stuff. So yeah, I mean, basically, it's a reasonably safe bet to assume that any computer game or tabletop game that has a Star Wars logo on it has entered my life and taken over my life to varying experiences at some point or another.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. No, it's funny you mentioned the tabletop games because in my locker right here, I actually still, from when I was a kid, have some of the figures because they were so cool. I have some of the Jedi in there, some of the Stormtroopers.
Yeah.
Uh, I loved collecting. I didn't play the game, but I loved collecting just the different models, and
Yeah, they
it was
just look
so
cool.
fun. Yeah.
Before I went away, because I haven't played Armada for years, despite the fact I really, really want to, but it's a dead game in the
Mhm.
sense that they're not making it anymore. I'm trying to find people to play it with. Can be tricky. But just before I went away to Japan, I bought another Armada ship that I really wanted, that I hadn't got before they stopped making them anymore. And it arrived just after I got back from Japan. It was like, a tiny toy has arrived and it's a little interdictor cruiser. Who wouldn't? That will go on a shelf.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, the stuff they made for them was super cool.
No, and then the other game that I played a lot, which now everyone's playing again, is Battlefront, Battlefront
Yeah,
2. Those games are incredible. I remember playing the original Battlefront 2, and being able to fly from the inside of one like giant ship,
yeah.
taking your little like X-Wing or your little TIE fighter and then going over to the other one and going inside of it. That blew my mind as a kid that like we were able to do that kind of stuff in a video game.
Yeah, it's like wow, technology's peaked. That we can, there's not even a loading screen between the two. What's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, all of those old Battlefront games were really cool, and I spent a lot of time on them. Yeah, they were just incredibly playable and very fun.
Yeah. Hopefully we're getting a third one. I can't believe it every day when I see these new statistics for how many people are playing and it's like breaking records and I think the game's
Yeah,
like 8 years old and it's being played more today than, when it first launched. It's like, wow. I don't know.
yeah.
I feel like hopefully something good comes from that because it's just
I
remarkable
hope
to see.
so. I mean, there's like the little voice in the back of my head is like, "Hey, EA, if you want someone to help you write the narrative story for Battlefront 3, then I'll do it." But I would suspect that I mean they've got over at EA for kind of like the EA Dice on the computer game. So because obviously they did Squadrons as well, which was a game that I really liked because it was
Yeah.
that old kind of X-Wing TIE fighter thing. Is Cole Horton, who was one of the co-authors on Battles, works over there with them doing that stuff now. So they're in pretty good hands for Star Wars related material.
But it doesn't hurt to put it out there into the
It doesn't
galaxy. You
hurt to
never
put it
know.
out there endlessly in a forlorn hope.
Yeah, tweet it out and look what happens. Look what happens when you
Yes,
put stuff out there. Oh my
I did
gosh.
I did post it like semi-jokingly on Blue Sky the other day in a sense of like I'm just going to say this and it's funny, but I do mean it. Absolutely, please let me do that.
Oh my gosh. No, that's awesome. You always have to take the chance because you never know. But your latest book, The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, has such a stunning cover.
Yeah, it
When I was making
does.
like the thumbnail for our interview and making the graphics and everything, I was like, man, what a insanely awesome cover. What was your reaction when you first saw it?
So firstly, I always forget to do it. So I'm going to shout out the cover work, which was done by Maurizio Campidelli, because I'm not saying, that people, judge a book by its cover, but I reckon we sold a decent number of books just based off of that front cover because it looks amazing. Um, and so I was delighted with it. And me and David Fentiman, who is my editor over at DK, both had basically the same idea when we were discussing the book for the cover. It was going to be either like an imperial symbol crumbling or a crumbling statue of Palpatine,
Oh,
something to give that disintegrating rise and fall visual for it. Um, and it maybe was um, maybe back end of, so last year was 2024, maybe late summer 2023 that some of the prototype designs started coming through. And I was thinking, those they just look great. Like whoever designed these absolutely understood the assignment, and then they kind of honed it and honed it and honed it till they got the final version, and it is so striking.
Mhm.
And it tells you everything you need to know about, that, and the title of the book leaves no doubt as to what the book is about. So yeah, Maurizio, you have done me a real solid by producing something so beautiful.
Oh my gosh, it's yeah, such a stunning cover. Whenever I go to the bookstore, it really does like pop and stand out from the rest of the books in that section. It's just like I don't know. I if I wrote a book like that and that was my cover, I'd be like it would have exceeded all of my expectations.
The day that it came out, I snuck into London just for me. I wasn't going to do like a bunch of stuff. I was just like, I'm just going to London to see if I can find it on bookstore shelves. And yeah, it just stands out from a
Mm.
mile away. It just looks wow, like a thing because of the black and the red contrast. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that makes me really happy.
Oh, that is incredible. For people who are watching this interview right now and they haven't had a chance yet to check out your book, how would you describe it?
So, Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire, it's an in-universe history book. And whilst I wrote it, the in-universe author for it is the character Beaumont Kin from the Rise of Skywalker film. He's the guy who explains his theory about how Palpatine has returned. He's played by Dominic Monaghan, who people usually recognize from the Lord of the Rings films as Merry. Um, but it's set, or he's writing it in the aftermath of the sequel trilogy, and he's looking back on the kind of the events of the First Order and taking it even further back to going, actually, to understand all of these awful things that have very recently just happened to us, we have to start again with our understanding of everything about the Galactic Empire, where it came from, how it operated, how its society functioned, how its military functioned, all of the awful things that it does. And he therefore attempts to take the galaxy, because he's kind of releasing this for free on the HoloNet, um, walk people through the reality of what the Galactic Empire was. So in that sense, it's kind of like a revisionist history book because he's kind of taking the starting point was, well, clearly we were way off with our previous understandings of the Empire. We've learned so much new, and he's been excavating the Sith Temple on Exegol, so he's been discovering new stuff as well. Um, and then just kind of wants to warn the people of the galaxy about what the Empire and what Imperial ideology means, so that maybe they can avoid having it come back for another time. So it's quite a heavy thing for him to be writing. But for us in the real world, it's it's probably the most in-depth examination of the fictional Galactic Empire as you're ever likely to get. And I wrote it like a history book, like I
Mm.
would write any other history book, with some slightly more kind of different approaches to it because it's Star Wars and because it's fiction. Um, and the like, but we put footnotes in there, we put references in there. There's a big old index. There's a bunch of images in it that are referenced as if we've pulled them out of the archive. We've tried our hardest to make it an immersive reading experience that will hopefully show people show people large parts of the empire that they'd never seen before because they didn't exist until we wrote the book. They'd either been hinted at the sides or had their passing mentions or had never appeared on screen. So we got the opportunity to create a bunch of stuff about the empire to fill in some of the notable gaps. So yeah, if people want, particularly having come off of Andor. And
Yeah.
again, Tony Gilroy did me a real solid as well by releasing episodes every week that kept making my book look better. Um, if you're coming off of that kind of Andor kick and you want another deeper, serious look at the Empire, then I think you might find quite a lot of interest in Rise and Fall.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I love this book so much because it's such, to me, a unique premise to have like an in-universe historical look at all these battles. It's just, I don't know, I feel like I've never heard of a concept like this before. And then to do it for something as big as Star Wars is just so cool to me.
So we were very much the beneficiaries of Christian Baver's Skywalker: A Family at War
Hmm. Oh,
book.
I love that book too.
which is a book that I love, and Christian Baver is one of the nicest, most wonderful people you'll ever met. So the precedent that she set of doing a sort of in-universe examination gave us a lot of kind of impetus and a lot of room to say, well, actually, okay, well now we'll evolve it further and lean even further into it. And at various points when we were kind of thinking about issues like we'd often go, well, how did Kristen handle this in Skywalker: A Family at War, and then to try and mirror a little bit to have kind of elements of consistency. And for the people, for those in the audience who have read Skywalker: A Family at War, and if you haven't, you should absolutely read Skywalker: A Family at War. It's a wonderful book. There are some links set up between Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire and something that might look a little bit like Skywalker: A Family at War in the Star Wars universe.
Oh, so cool. Yeah, I love that book too. I think I have that like Target exclusive
With
deluxe
the extra
edition of,
stuff.
yeah. Oh, so cool. I love when like Barnes and Noble or Target have like those extra e- either like a poster or like a exclusive art section of it.
Yeah.
I love collecting that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a very cool way of having some extra stuff of like a little because it's a type of thing where if you do just have like the normal version, you haven't really missed out on anything. They're not going to put like it's not like a detective novel and they're going to put like who the murderer was
Yeah.
in the last chapter, but you can only get it if you go to Target.
Yeah.
It's just an extra little bounty of little sugary high lore that is a fun extra thing to have.
Mhm. So you've gotten to cover a lot of different eras of Star Wars, but is there a particular era that you haven't gotten a chance to write for that you would like to, or maybe one that you would like to explore a little bit more?
That's a really good question. Because I've covered so between Rise and Fall, which is like the entirety of the original trilogy, basically, and bits of the sequel trilogy and a bit of the prequel trilogy, and for Battles That Change the Galaxy, where it was, every battle that appears on screen or in the pages of a graphic novel or a computer game or something like that. There's a big old spread of stuff between, like the Republic era and the Clone Wars and the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy. So I have covered a lot. I haven't done anything for the High Republic. And
Ooh.
obviously that the novel series is coming to an end.
Mhm.
But I'd be surprised if the High Republic didn't become like a staple for storytelling, or that High Republic era didn't become a staple for storytelling going forwards. So that would be a fun thing to explore in the future. And there's for a historian like me who deals with war, there's a ton of possibilities in the Clone Wars, in the Galactic Civil War, in the First Order Resistance War, that might be fun to play around with in the future. Given that 50% of Star Wars is wars, I feel confident that there may be a space for me in the future somewhere.
That and Star Wars Battlefront 3.
Yes, and Battlefront 3, which
Yep.
I'm expecting my phone to go off within minutes of this going live.
Oh my gosh. Well, I did want to ask you one more thing, since we're already in June, which is crazy how fast this year is going. But we
Yeah,
did just have May the 4th. I was
we did.
curious, did you do anything special to celebrate?
Um, So there was a live stream event done by Chelsea Zakowski and the kind of the YouTube book review Star Wars website This Dad Reads,
Oh,
and I dropped him for that. So it was me, it was Lydia Kang, and it was Justina Ireland, all dropped in for a little bit of
oh.
chatting with people, and then there was a giveaway and the like, and that was a lot of fun. I don't actually think I got around to watching any Star Wars that day, which is quite odd. But we'd only been back from Japan like a
Yeah.
matter of days, so I think I was still relatively jet lagged at that point. So I think like short space of like I will do a 15-minute live stream thing and then I will go and possibly fall asleep was probably the ceiling of my ability at the time.
Yeah, no, I can't even imagine the jet. Like, how long was the flight from where you are to the convention?
So it was about 13 or 15 hours,
Oh my gosh.
something like that. So it kept on going
Oh,
for prolonged periods of time. So, but it's one of those things that so I didn't sleep at all on the way out there and therefore hated it. And I did sleep a bit on the way back, but it's one of those things that when you're doing it is varying just different shades of dreadful. And
Mhm.
then the second I land, it's like, don't care about the flight
Yeah.
anymore. The flight is in the past.
Mhm.
I may be tired and I may be annoyed about the fact that I'm tired, but the flight is over.
Mhm.
I don't have to interact with that again until like 2 weeks time when I have to fly back. And then that may be awful, but the second that I land, done. Don't care anymore.
Oh my gosh, yeah, no. And then you just get to enjoy the celebration and all the
Yes.
craziness that starts from the minute you get there. That's so cool. But Chris, I cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your day to be here and talk
Thank you
all
for
things
having
Star
me.
Wars with me. Where would be a good place if people want to keep up with all your other upcoming projects and see what you're up to next? Where would they go follow you?
So, Blue Sky is a good place. I'm on Blue Sky, Instagram as well that we mentioned earlier. Both of those, you'll get like anything fun that I'm doing. You'll get little snapshots, whether it's kind of history related or Star Wars related or playing tiny toys related. That will probably appear on Instagram. So those are good places to check. And if people want to kind of find out more about the other bits and pieces that I've done, chriskempshall.com is my website. It's very imaginatively titled. It's the benefit of being the only Chris Kempshall who's ever existed, that I'm very easy to find on Blue Sky and Instagram. It's just me. So yeah, you'll find a bunch of stuff kind of spread across the three of those, I reckon.
Awesome. I'll put some links down in the description of this video so
Oh,
everyone can come
amazing.
and follow you. But Chris, thank you again for being here, and may the force be with you.
May the force be with you.